Hello, and welcome to another episode of me reacting to fan-made cards I found online. Once again, this episode doesn't feature any cards that I actively found online, but cards that were sent to me, this time by Coelophysis. And he sent me 36 cards. Obviously, we're not going through 36 cards in this episode, that would be too many. We're going through the first half, and I skipped through them already. They are all quite interesting, and they have some themes to them that I will discuss a little bit later. But this first card here, Dust Collectors, is quite creative. It is a zero cost building tag. I don't quite understand how that would work, how you can build something for zero cost. I guess they are built in combination with tiles in the lore, more or less. I don't know. And that's why they are so cheap, but let's not hang ourselves up with the lords for too long and just discuss the card itself. It has a max requirement of 5 oceans, so you have to play it in the early to mid game. Um, Even though it doesn't cost anything, it still has a implicit cost with this requirement or with this power prot that you have to spend. And then you get an instant payback of 1 steel, uh, basically per tile placed on Mars. It counts city, greenery, and special tiles. That should encompass basically everything. Ah, no, it doesn't encompass oceans. But other than that, every tile that can be owned by players basically will grant you a steal. Mm, this is a typical, you want to play it as late as possible to get the maximum payout, but you can't play it in the last gen because it requires there to be a maximum of 5 oceans type of card. There's quite a few cards like this in the game. I mean, the simplest example is Dust Seals, where you don't want to pay for a point early on, but you can play it only in the early game because of the max 3 oceans thingy. If we think about this card here, it costs 0, so you only have to pay to buy it, 3 MC, and then it costs on average 7 MC for this power, so 10 MC, so there need to be at least 5 tiles on Mars. That's quite easy, but oceans do not count. I think the tiles that get placed in the early game are mostly oceans and cheap special tiles, and then greeneries, and then cities usually come down later. Um, the thing is, in the late game, sometimes steel isn't that valuable anymore. A lot of steel cards are early game production cards, and it could be that you get a lot of steel out of this, and in the mid to late game, it doesn't do that much for you anymore. But you have to play it rather early, anyways. I think this card seems rather reasonably balanced. The trade-off between the max requirement and as many tiles as possible on Mars is quite interesting and pushes you, if you want to actively contribute to this, into a ground game, which I like, especially if you're playing with all expansions. So I like this card. I don't think it would be too broken because it pays back steel, and as I said, steel is quite limited in what you can do with it. Next up, we have a card which I think is quite broken, Pathogen Viruses. It costs only 1 MC, so once again a cheap card. It has a microbe tag. It starts off with 8 microbes on this card and then immediately draws you 5 cards, which is insane. The 8 microbes on this card are minus 8 points, so the trade-off actually would be horrendous. You don't want to draw 5 cards to end up with minus 8 points. That would be incredibly difficult to make up for. But each time you play a science tech, you can remove one of the microbes on this card. So basically, by going for a science strat, you can remove all of the microbes here. Then this card, if you successfully remove all of them, won't score any negative points, and you will have just drawn a lot of cards for very cheap. This is basically, if you play colonies, or like colonies already pushes you into an engine game plan, or if you're not playing with colonies, you know from your starting hand or your starting corp that you want to go for engine, then this is one of the best cards you could have on your starting hand. It's incredibly cheap. It has a sometimes useful tag, and it draws you a lot of cards that can help you set up combos, get your early economy going, and it is even cash positive if you draw only crap. You can just sell all 5 cards, and this card costs only 4 to buy and play. Obviously, you need to get rid of these microbes, otherwise they probably will lose you the game. But if you play this really early on, then the science tag, then this effect up here basically allows you to get rid of all of these microbes if you get enough science tags. And there's other ways. You can also find ants. That would be also a really nice combo. Ants with pathogen viruses. Get rid of the microbes that way, have an easy target. And yeah, I think this card is too strong in the early game, and it is horrendous later on. So basically, if you draw this in the mid to late game, it's absolutely useless because you never want to spend 8 points on 5 new cards. You'd need to be really confident that you can get all of the science tags out. Obviously, if you maybe started out the game with getting Planner down, getting Earthcat down, and collecting a few cards, and you know, okay, I have already 6 or 7 science tags on hand that I want to get down, and then pathogen viruses can be even playable in the mid game. But yeah, it's one of the strongest early game cards if I've ever seen one. And also, it's utterly useless for Rush, because you will never get rid of all of these microbes. So it's something that you need to cut as a Rush player in the draft for sure in the early gens, and that would make it quite frustrating. So I don't particularly like it, even though I think it's very creative. So that's one of this card introduces one of the themes here. It's a Turmoil card, which requires one party ruling. In this case, it's Unity. And it gives you an effect which is only active while that party is ruling. So this card, Protection by World Government for 1 MCU and an Earth tag, has the effect that while Unity is ruling, opponents cannot remove your resources or lower your production. That's a useful effect, but it's not game breaking. We already have protected tabs in the game, which does that for plant, basically protects your plants, animals, and microbes. There have been many ideas for cards which protect your other resources. And the thing is, most of the hate cards remove plants. There's some hate cards which can lower your production or remove other resources like sabotage, there's greatest carbon consortium, there's the 2 tapping cards, and so on. But especially if you're playing with Turmoil, and most likely all other expansions in that case as well, these cards get lost in a deck. There's not that many. So this card brings some useful utility, but it ensures you against only quite a few cards in a huge deck and only in some gens. So this is definitely justified that this card is so cheap. I like it still because it's thematically coherent, and it's a creative idea, and I don't think it's too strong. There are other cards with this new theme giving you an effect while one specific party is ruling, which are much stronger than this one. But yeah, I like it. I'd love to see this introduced into the game. AI Assistant costs 2 MC, comes with 2 power tags. Really nice. We don't have a card like this in the game yet. And it says when you play a power card, you pay 1 MC less per power tag you have. Basically, power tags scale with themselves. I think it's interesting that this doesn't hold any science tag because that would be, would fit thematically. But I like that it gives power tags a buff. You all know I think power tags are too weak. And This is really, really cool. I would love this. This card alone already gives um, every power tech you play afterwards a 2MC discount, and it only scales from there. The cool thing, and which I think why this card is not completely busted, because there could be scenarios where you get to a discount of -6 or something on every power tech is. As I lament on all the time, power techs do mainly one thing: they give you more power prod. And that has diminishing returns, basically. You don't want a million power prod. There's only so much power prod you need, and that's why I think this can't really get out of control. If there were a ton of power techs that also can give you other stuff and a lot of points, then AI Assistant could be busted, but most power techs just give you power, not many points, almost no other effects. There are obviously great power techs like Mass Converter and Quantum, but they are few and far between, and main thing of why they are great is still they give you a lot of power prod for cheap. So I like AI Assistant. I think it's not too busted. It could be quite nice to play in the first gen to get a discount on all future power techs, especially if you want to if you're playing with colonies, you want to get a few power techs down to get power prod to trade. So nice card and really creative. Another one of these cards for Turmoil, this time for the Reds with the Jovian tech. While the Reds are ruling, you may play cards with a maximum requirement, even if that requirement has already been exceeded. And I flipped a bit through the base game deck, and this effect definitely just doesn't seem too strong. Yeah, there are cards, and I spoke about one earlier with Dust Seals, that definitely have some kind of trade-off on them, where you would like to play them later, and the max requirement prevents you from doing that. But none of the cards that I looked through were too strong and would be broken with this in game. There are some interesting cases in like Venus Next, for example, uh, which I will put on screen right now, where you can do some funny stuff with them. But something like Dust Seals, Natural Preserve, they don't get crazy if you play them in the last gen. It's nice if you can, and Constitutional Amendment is really cheap again, especially if you draw this for free. Get this down in the last gen. Maybe you even have a discount, and then you'll be able to play Dust Seals for a really cheap point. So that's nice, but it's not game breaking. And the fact that you can only do it when the Reds are in power is, again, a limiting factor. The Jovian tech on a really cheap card can have really good value if you have one or two Jovian multipliers down, then this card is already really nice for the low cost. I like the effect. It's cool, but it's not too broken. I'd love to see this in the game. Power Grid Meltdown, thematically really nice card. It is a power event, which I think there is none in the game as of yet. Costs 2 MC, has a negative point, and you gain 3 heat per power tech you have. I liked it. I like it. It's so thematically consistent. You have a huge power grid, symbolized by all of the power techs you have. Um, and if that melts down, it will generate a lot of heat, but also it's not a good thing, so you should get a negative point for it. So I really like this card. It's a creative way to buff the power tech once again, making you be really strong in increasing the heat. It's great for a rust strategy or just a nice little point bomb. It could also be a great thermalist swing. It's super cheap, so if you have a discount in Media Group, it can even be cash positive. I really like this. But you'd need to get. I mean, if you only have 3 power tags, including this, you get 9 heat. If a TR is basically, or let's say a heat bump, is worth. Asteroid is 17. 11. So heat bump is roughly worth 11. And buying and playing this is 5 plus 5, so 10. So if you get 9 heat, it's in theory already positive value, but you'd like to get more than that, because the opportunity cost of picking this up in the draft over another card is definitely there. So you'd need to hope that you get 12, 15 heat, something like that. But then I think it's a pretty good card. Not too broken. It's pretty limited in what it does. And once again, limited by the fact that most power tags only grant you power prot. And if you have tons and tons of power prot, you already have a lot of heat. So it doubles down on what you already have. But really nice card. I love it. Political recalibration, I'm not that sold on. It costs 3 MC, is an event card, and it just says you can rearrange all your delegates and parties, add a delegate to a party. I think this rearrange sentence, first of all, probably needs to be clarified a bit. So how I understand it, you can just, no matter how many delegates you have and no matter where they are in the parties, you can just freely move them around once when you play this card, and then you also add another delegate. That could be clarified a little bit. I think this is too strong for that cheap of a cost. You pay only 1 MC more than for adding a delegate to a party for 5 MC with a standard project. And then you also get to move all your delegates. That's quite crazy. That can mean you can swing an election really easily. I think it's too swingy. I think it's really frustrating for all the other players who have fought over an election, for example. It should cost more, or it should limit the amount of delegates you can move, or it should not grant you a new delegate. One of these things, I think. I think this is too strong. Parasites. This is also a card that has huge potential. It has a microbe tag, it's quite cheap with 4 MC. It has a negative point, and it says spend an animal from another card to add a microbe to each of your card that can collect microbes. You all know I love a good microbe combo. This requires a huge amount of setup. You need preferably an animal collecting card that only grants you half a point, something like pets. Also, you need an animal card that will have enough animals on it. Small animals, for example, is quite nice because you get 1 per gen and then you can immediately spend it with parasites. And you need a lot of microbe tags for this to be worth it. If you have, for example, decomposers and ants, 2 of the best microbe collecting cards, 1 microbe on both of them is basically worth 5/6 of a point, but you spend half a point on from small animals, so you only get a third of a point by activating parasites, and it comes with a negative point, and it requires a lot of setup. You need those 3 cards. You probably need 3 or more really good microbe collecting cards for this to work, plus a half point animal. That's a lot of requirements, but there can be situations where you have 4 or more microbe collecting cards. Let's say tardigrades, psychrophiles, decomposers, insects, and small animals. Then parasites is insane, and you score a lot of points, and also MC basically with psychrophiles. Also combine this with topsoil contract, and you have an insane engine piece as well. So it's really swingy basically with the right setup in an engine setup with a lot of card draw where you're likely to get these cards. Parasites can be crazy. And if you don't have the right cards, it's basically completely useless. And I don't think we need swingy cards like that require a lot of card draw and specific cards to work amazingly. I think there's a lot of those cards in the game already, but creative for sure and thematically consistent again. Black Market requires a city tile, which makes sense. You need a place where the black market can happen, basically. And it has an action that allows you to play a card with a 7 MC discount. But basically, every time you do this, you lose a point. The corruption resource probably could use a new icon instead of the science resource, but I get it. You would need to design that yourself. So a point which you lose when activating Black Market is worth 5 MC. So each time you use Black Market to play a card for a 7 MC discount, you make 2 MC. That means it's pretty good already. Remember, sponsors costs 1 more for 2 MC prot. Obviously, it has a city requirement, which means sometimes you cannot play this Gen 1 or even Gen 2 or even Gen 3. And with each Gen later that you get this down, it loses obviously in value because in its core, it's a development card. But in contrast to sponsors, for example, it also is an action card, so it activates in the gen, you get it down immediately, which means the cost of it basically is lower. It only costs 3 MC instead of 5. And then it's a pretty good development card. You could probably compare it to Psychrophiles more or less. It's just 1 MC more expensive. It just requires that you are playing cards each gen. Sometimes you have off gens where you can't get a card down, or you can't get a card down that costs at least 7 MC. You cannot use this. You shouldn't use this on a card which costs 5 MC or less, because then what are you doing? The point is worth 5 MC already. I mean, I guess if you really need to get a good card down for 5 MC, you can still do it. It's cash neutral basically, and gives you tempo. And that's the second thing. Black Market gives you a lot of tempo. Each gen you can get cards down that you shouldn't be able to get down. Probably large cards that cost more resources than you have. And it's basically a constant indentured workers. Indentured workers is a 5 MC discount because you pay 3 to buy it and then gives you an 8 MC discount for negative points. So it's cash neutral basically. The action here, the activation of the card is actually cash positive. And this is a really good card if you get it down, if you can get it down early. So I like the concept. Again, thematically consistent. Could get out of hand if you get this down Gen 1. But I like these negative point cards, like the viruses card earlier also. Quite creative. Okay, this is one of those cards where I said, okay, this one is crazy. It's one of the Turmoil cards again. It requires Mass First to be ruling, to be played, and then the effect only is active when Mass First is ruling. What I like here is that it buffs Mass First, which is not a great party. Basically, Unity is a really strong party, and therefore I was fine with protection by world government being quite weak, because Unity will be in power quite often. So it's nice that the effect isn't too strong. The reds aren't that strong, but the effect is still quite weak. But the card is fine and has a Jovian tag, so it's nice. Mass First, in my opinion, is a quite weak party, so it's okay that the effect is stronger, but this effect seems really strong. Basically, it just allows you to pay or steal for any card you play in gens where Mass First is ruling. That's crazy. One of the things that I always say is, especially in late game, you will often run out of building tax you can pay for with steel. that actually achieve meaningful stuff, because a lot of building tags are just early development cards that don't yield a lot of points, cards that grant prod, card draw, or whatever, but those are early game cards. And another thing is, if you're playing with Turmoil and a lot of the other expansions, the percentage of building cards in a deck also shrinks, so steel prod is even weaker. But with experimental materials, your steel prod suddenly is supercharged. You can pay for any card with steel. That means a card like mine suddenly basically is sponsors. Obviously, you can't do it any gen, but you can probably get Mars first ruling at least twice per game, and then you can just focus on these two gens and get your cards out that you want to get out and spend all of your steel. If you can get Mars first ruling in the last gen, then experimental materials is really, really great. You can get rid of all of the steel you stockpiled, play point cards, pay with steel. If there's Ceres in game, if you're playing with colonies, you can fly there, collect a ton of steel because that colony pays out like crazy, and then get so many cards down with this. Really, really strong effect. I think game breaking in some scenarios, but I still like it because I think steel prod and building tags got a bit too much, not hate, but they got nerfed a bit too much with the expansions. So I like experimental materials. Combine this with like Rego plastics or advanced alloys, and you're going nuts. Heat resistant bacteria. It requires 2% oxygen, so 2 oxygen steps. Costs 6 MC, has a microbe tag. When someone plays a microbe tag, including this, you gain 2 heat. I like it. It helps you to rush a little bit. Even in an engine strat, it can help you score a few points. It's nice for Thermalist. And it buffs the microbe tag, which I think in the expansions probably isn't needed anymore. I think if you're playing with a lot of expansions, the microbe tag is already quite strong. If you're just playing base game, it can sometimes be a little bit underwhelming. I think this is a nice card, and there should be more cards like this in the expansions that help you finish the game. Even though this can be played by engine, pure engine cards are a little bit overrepresented, especially if you're playing with colonies and turmoil, and this can definitely just help you finish the game. I like it. Iron Snails, 6 MC, a lot of cheap cards in this set. Requires 2 oceans at least. It has an animal tag and a building tag. A really rare combo. I don't know if there's a card like this in a game. It's not an animal collecting card, so that's definitely rare, but it grants 1 animal to another card, so the full potential of this card is only achieved if you have an animal down, and preferably a 1-point animal, but that is counteracted by the fact that this grants production. So this is once again a card where you want to play it late to gain the full point potential, but you also want to play it early to gain the full production potential. You get either titanium production or steel production plus 1 steel immediately. So it's quite flexible, grants a point. Nice card. I like the trade-off. It's much better in theory than something like titanium mine if you can get it down early, because more tax means more value. Cheaper than titanium mine, and theoretically a point or half a point. But there's factors working together. The requirement can hinder you from playing it early. The animal can just be irrelevant because you don't have 1 down. It's more expensive. It's more expensive on the face of it than mine if you want the steel prod, but you get the steel back, and then it's the same cost, and once again has potentially a point and another tag. So I like this trade-off on this card. There's several trade-offs. I like it. Martian hummus enriching. This costs again 6 MC, is a plant event, requires a plant and a microbe tag, and it has a crazy effect. Crazy strong in some scenarios and crazy in general, because not only does it grant 3 TR, which is an insane deal for 6 MC, but it also requires you to spend 4 plants or 3 microbes. That's a huge cost up front in addition to the 6 MC. It also lets everyone increase their plant production by 1 step. This everyone increases their plant production by 1 step is neutral, basically, because you also get to increase your plant production. So in the worst case, it's just neutral. In the best case, this allows you to play something like small animals or fish, even if your opponent doesn't have plant prod. And that's a combo which I think is super funny. The cost of the card seems fine, but it can be quite hard to play with the requirement up here and the cost down here. I still think it's really creative. I think if you can make use of the combo to immediately afterwards remove that plant prod again, then the card is really, really strong. I'd need to playtest this a little bit, but yeah, great idea. Okay, this name is pretty difficult. Mycorrhizal fungi? I don't quite know. Cost 6 MC. Once again, is a plant tag. It requires you to have a greenery down, and it lets you copy the production box of one of your plant cards. So similar to Robotic Workforce, that lets you copy the production box of one of your building tags. This does the same with the plant card. And obviously there are plant cards in this game which have crazy production boxes. Something like trees, kelp farming, or even ecology research. They have insane or can have insane production boxes. The thing with most of these is they can either be only played in the late game or they reach their full potential in the late game. Insane plant producers like insects or NRA are not plant tags that you can copy with this. So it's quite limited, but with the right combo, it's crazy. I'm thinking of a start with experimental forest. So you get a greenery down, and then eco experts into kelp, and then mycorrhizal fungi. That would be an instant concede by the opponent, basically, because that would not be winnable for them. Crazy combo potential, but the max requirement and the fact that most plant tags come down quite late nerfed this a bit. Still, if you have kelp farming, this is an insta keep. Quite a scary card. I like it. Odysseus Station 6 MC once again. Maybe this is the favorite number of the creator of these cards. There's a space tag that gives you an action that allows you to spend 5 energy to trade, but you get to increase the colony track 2 steps. I wish cards like Trading Colony or Trade Envoys did it like this, where you can't just increase the colony track for free. You have to pay an extra cost. This is strong. I still think this is strong. If we check, let's take a look at the colony tiles. Best case for Luna, for example, is you get 7 MC more. If the marker is on 10 MC and you increase it by 2 steps, it goes up to 17 MC. So you spend 2 energy for 7 MC. Pretty good. Best case for Callisto, you get 6 power more. Best case for Miranda would be just 1 animal, actually. You can never get 2 animals more. But yeah, for Enceladus, for example, there's cases where you can get 2 microbes more. I think the trade-off is almost always worth it. There might be cases where it's not worth it, but the good thing here is that you can use it only once per gen. So one of the frustrating things with trading colony and trade envoys for your opponents is if you have multiple trade fleets, it just gets out of hand. And with Odysseus Station, it doesn't, because you can only use it for one of your trade fleets, basically. I like it. I like that there's a power trade-off. It makes it more difficult to use because you need even more power than you already need in colonies. I like the idea. Temperature agreement. This costs 6 MC. It requires the Calvinists to rule. It's one of these cards again. And while the Calvinists are ruling, you only need 6 heat to increase the temperature instead of 8. Once again, a card that helps you rush, and that's something that's sorely needed in the expansions. I really like this. I think it's quite strong, especially because heat you can easily stockpile and then use all at once in that gen when the Calvinists are ruling. Obviously, that still has downsides because if you use the heat earlier, you get TR out of it, which is development, which leads to more MC in your bank. But it's not like with plants where you can, if you stockpile your plants, they can get destroyed. No, heat can't get stolen or destroyed. So you can at least like stockpile it for 1 or 2 gens and then use it all once the Calvinists are ruling. You'd need to make good use out of this, because if you pay 9 MC to buy and play this, you should better use this 3, 4, even more times for it to be really worth it. But it could actually, for example, help you end the game or get the bonus ocean, and then it's definitely worth it. A really cool idea, thematically fitting again. I really like it. Bioengineering. This card costs 7 MC, has a requirement of 2 microbe tags, has a science and a microbe tag on it, grants 1 point, and starts off with 2 microbes on it. Whoa, quite a hefty setup already. But it's basically adaptation tag on steroids, because you can add more microbes to this card, so you're not limited to the 2 on here. And then it has an effect. Each time you play a card with a microbe or animal tag, for each microbe you remove from this card, your global requirements are plus or minus 1 step, your choice in each case. So with these 2 starting microbes, you can already basically achieve the adaptation tag ability once if you're playing a microbe or animal tag. But you can get this down Gen 1, collect a few microbes on. Obviously, the requirement can be difficult in Gen 1, but collect a few microbes, and then you can get, for example, birds down at 8% oxygen, for example, if you use 5 microbes on here. And that could be huge. It's limited to microbe and animal tags, so that rules out some of the best cases for adaptation tag. For example, kelp farming or Lake Marineris. But for some cards, it's still, for the microbe tags, often it's not that useful because not that many microbes have really high requirements, but it can be useful for something like Venusian insects, for example. But there are animal tags that you absolutely want to play early. If we look at Venus Next again, Venusian animals, for example, stratospheric birds, it would be great to play those earlier. Venusian animals especially is an insane engine card, but one problem it has, it forces you into a Venus game plan, and you might not want to go down that route. And with bioengineering, you could circumvent that somewhat. It's definitely difficult to get down. It's quite niche, but the cheaper cost compared to adaptation tag and the fact that it still holds a point and has useful tags, I think makes it quite good. And then the last card of today's episode, Stratospheric Batteries. Speaking of Venus Next, comes with a Venus tag and a power tag. And it has an action where you can either spend X energy to add X floaters to this card, so basically just convert energy into floaters, or then spend 1 floater to get 3 energy. So basically you can triple your energy, but you can only use up 1 floater per gen, while you can use up a lot of energy to get floaters at once. And I think the best use case for this is a trade to Callisto, get quite a bit of energy, then convert all of that energy or some of that energy into floaters, and then use up 1 floater per gen to trade afterwards. That means you basically don't need power prod, and you can use stratospheric batteries to trade for the rest of the game. Obviously, you could also just get power prod online, then use this once, then use the floaters afterwards to trade, and in exchange you can use your power for playing power hungry cards. So there's a lot of use cases, and the fact that this costs only 7 plus 3 and basically triples a specific amount of energy and has, especially if you're playing with colonies, quite a bit of utility, makes this card quite useful in my opinion. I think outside of colonies, it's not that great. It's really slow. You would basically use this as a way to get more heat, but it uses up power, which is already 1 turn away from being heat, turns that into floaters, and then later and delayed, because you can only convert 1 floater, you get more power, which then again takes 1 turn to convert to heat. That's just really slow if you're just using the power as heat. So this is, in my opinion, only really viable if you're playing with colonies. But in that case, it's quite nice and has a bit of utility. But yeah, that were all of the cards that I wanted to talk about today. Next episode, we will go about the rest of the set, go through the rest of the set, I should say. And once again, thanks to Coelophysis, this is quite an interesting set. I liked most of these cards. They were really, really creative. And yeah, if you have a set of cards that you made, let me know. And I would love to take a look. Also, let me know in the comment what you thought of these cards. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And I hope I see you in the next one. Have a good one, guys, and goodbye.